Hello everyone and welcome to today's presentation. I'm excited to introduce our topic, population, distribution, density, growth, and composition. In this session, we'll explore how populations are spread across regions, how densely populated areas are, the patterns of growth over time, and the various factors that shape population makeup. Let's dive in and get started. Let's take a closer look at the composition of the working population. Here, we examine how different segments of the population contribute to the workforce, which is vital for understanding economic productivity and development. Next, we move on to population growth. It's important to see how our population has expanded over time and the factors influencing this growth, such as birth rates, death rates, and migration patterns. We also have the section on linguistic composition. Language plays a crucial role in shaping cultural identity and communication within the population, so understanding the diversity here helps us appreciate the social fabric of our society. Following that, we focus on the growth of the adolescent population. This group is significant because it impacts future labor supply and educational needs, shaping long-term planning strategies. Then there's the density of the population, which shows us how crowded certain areas are. Population density affects infrastructure, resource distribution, and quality of life, making it an important factor in regional planning. Moving on, we see a slide dedicated to states having a low proportion of rural population. These states are usually more urbanized, indicating different development patterns and economic activities compared to rural areas. Regional variation in population growth is another critical point. Different regions grow at different rates due to various socioeconomic factors, leading to uneven development across the country. The rural-urban composition highlights the shift from rural to urban living, a trend that's been accelerating with urbanization and industrialization. Understanding this helps us plan for infrastructure, services, and sustainable growth. Distribution of population is about where people are concentrated geographically. This distribution shapes regional policies and resource allocation. We also explore the phases of population growth, which show us how population dynamics have evolved over time, from slow growth to rapid increases, and sometimes stabilization or decline. Finally, there's an infographic that visually summarizes these concepts, making the data more accessible and easier to understand at a glance. All of these points are interconnected and help us grasp the broader picture of our population's structure, growth patterns, and regional differences. Thank you for your attention. Let's take a closer look at this infographic. As you can see, the figures here represent different financial metrics across various segments. Starting from the left, we see 2 billion, which might indicate a smaller market or a niche segment. Moving to 45 billion, the next figure, shows significant growth, highlighting an expanding area. Then we have 35 billion, slightly less than the previous, but still substantial. Following that, 25 billion suggests a decline or a different focus area. The 95 billion mark indicates a major segment, likely a key driver within the overall landscape. Next, 115 billion shows even greater scale, emphasizing its importance. Throughout this infographic, what stands out is how these numbers reflect the diversity and scale of different sectors. Connecting this to our overall theme, it's clear that understanding these variations helps us identify where the biggest opportunities and challenges lie. Recognizing these figures allows us to tailor our strategies effectively and focus on the segments with the most potential for growth. Let's take a look at the distribution of population across different regions in India. First, we see that hilly and tribal areas like Jammu and Kashmir, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, all northeastern states except Assam, and union territories excluding Delhi are generally less populated. These areas tend to have challenging terrain and less urbanization, which influences their population density. Moving on, we have the low population states, which include Assam, Haryana, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Kerala, Punjab, and Goa. These states have comparatively smaller populations, often due to geographic, economic, or social factors. Next, there are the moderate population states. Uttar Pradesh, which is the most populous state, along with Maharashtra, Bihar, West Bengal, Madhya Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Rajasthan, Karnataka, Gujarat, and Andhra Pradesh. These states together account for a significant 76% of India's total population, highlighting their importance in demographic studies and planning. Finally, we come to the high population states. The distribution of population in India is quite uneven, meaning some areas are densely populated while others are sparsely populated. This uneven spatial pattern is a key feature of India's demographic landscape. Some states have millions of people living very close together, while others are more sparsely populated, which affects resource allocation, development planning, and infrastructure. Understanding this variation helps us see why regional development strategies need to be tailored specifically to the demographic realities of each area. Let's take a closer look at the population density across different states and union territories in India. As you can see, some regions have very low population densities, while others are extremely densely populated. For example, Arunachal Pradesh has one of the lowest densities, with just 17 persons per square kilometer, followed by Mizoram with 52, Jammu and Kashmir with 56, Sikkim with 86, and Nagaland with 119. Among the Union territories, Andaman and Nicobar Islands also have a low density, at 46. Moving to the low-density states and UTs, we see Haryana with 573, Tamil Nadu at 555, Punjab with 551, Jharkhand with 414, Assam at 398, Goa with 394, Maharashtra at 365, and Tripura with 350. Notably, Dadra and Nagar Haveli has a high density of 700 persons per square kilometer, indicating significant population concentration there. In the moderate density category, Bihar stands out with the highest density at 1106 persons per square kilometer. West Bengal follows with 1028, Kerala with 860, Uttar Pradesh at 829, and among UTs, Delhi has the highest density at 11,320, with Chandigarh close behind at 9,258. This brings us to the high-density areas, which are concentrated mainly in urban regions like Delhi and Chandigarh. Now, let's connect this to the overall pattern of population distribution in India. Population density refers to the number of persons living per unit area, typically per square kilometer. According to the 2011 census, India has an average of 382 persons per square kilometer. Over the past 50 years, this density has increased significantly, by about 260 persons per square kilometer, growing from 117 in 1951 to 382 in 2011. This rapid increase highlights how densely populated some regions have become over time, which is a key factor in understanding India's demographic challenges and planning for future development. When we talk about population growth, it's important to understand what causes these changes. First, we have what's called induced growth. This refers to changes that happen due to the volume of inward and outward movement in an area. In other words, people moving in and out, which can significantly impact the population size. Then there's natural growth. This is about the changes caused by births and deaths within a specific area. It's a natural process that directly affects how many people live in a place over time. Now, when we discuss the growth of a population, we're looking at how the number of people changes between 2 points in time. And it's interesting to note that this change is usually expressed as a percentage, giving us a clear way to compare growth rates across different areas or periods. To sum up, population growth has two main components: induced growth, driven by migration, and natural growth, driven by birth and death rates. Both are essential for understanding how populations change and what factors are influencing those changes. This understanding helps us grasp the bigger picture of demographic trends and their impact on societies. Let's take a closer look at the different phases of population growth in India. Starting with Phase I, which spans from 1901 to 1921, this was a period of relatively slow growth. Then, Moving to phase II from 1921 to 1951, we see what is often called the population explosion. During this time, the death rate fell rapidly, and fertility remained high, leading to a sharp increase in population. Next, in phase III, from 1951 to 1981, the growth rate became very low, and the population growth started to stagnate or stabilize. This was mainly due to better health, family planning, and declining birth rates. Finally, in phase IV, from 1981 to the present, we observe a period of steady population growth. Although the growth rate has started to decline gradually, especially because of a downward trend in birth rates, in developing countries like India, the growth rate remains relatively high. According to the World Development Report, by 2025, India's population is expected to surpass 1350 million. This overview helps us understand how demographic trends have evolved over time and highlights the importance of ongoing population management efforts. Let's take a closer look at the regional variation in population growth across India. As we can see, the growth rates are quite uneven from one region to another. For instance, Nagaland has experienced a slight decline, with a growth rate of -0.58%, making it the lowest among all states. In contrast, some states like Kerala, Goa, and Andhra Pradesh have shown positive growth rates of 4.91%, 8.23%, and nearly 11% respectively. When we look at Union territories, Lakshadweep and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands have growth rates of around 6.3 and 6.86%, respectively. Moving to the states with low growth rates, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and Uttar Pradesh all fall in this category, with rates ranging from about 20 to 23%. On the other hand, states like Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh, Bihar, and Manipur are experiencing moderate growth, with rates between approximately 24 and 28%. Interestingly, some union territories like Dadra and Nagar Haveli, Daman and Diu, and Puducherry have much higher growth, exceeding 50% in some cases. The most striking point here is how uneven the population growth pattern is across the country. It ranges from a negative growth in Nagaland to an incredible 55.88% increase in Dadra and Nagar Haveli. This highlights the diverse demographic realities within India and underscores the importance of region-specific policies to manage this growth effectively. The United Nations defines persons aged 10 to 19 years as the adolescent population. Since 1971, this group's proportion has remained steady at around 21%. Now, looking at India specifically, the decadal growth rate of our adolescent population was about 12.5% according to the 2011 census. This is a significant increase, and it places India fourth in the world for adolescent population, after Pakistan, Nigeria, and Bangladesh. To put it into perspective, the number of adolescents in India has risen from 85 million in 1961 to over 253 million in 2011. That's quite a leap, showing how our youth demographic is expanding rapidly. Another important point is the sex ratio within this age group. Currently, India has about 898 females for every 1,000 males among adolescents. This highlights some ongoing gender disparities that we need to address. Finally, it's encouraging to note that the government has recognized the importance of this demographic. Policies like the National Youth Policy of 2003 aim to channelize and utilize the potential of adolescents through proper education and other initiatives. These steps are crucial for shaping a healthy, productive future for our country. Population composition is a detailed analysis of various demographic aspects within a population. It includes factors like age and sex distribution, which help us understand the demographic structure and potential growth trends. It also looks at place of residence, distinguishing between urban and rural populations, which can influence access to resources and services. Ethnic characteristics and tribes highlight the cultural diversity within a population, while language and religion provide insights into cultural identity and social cohesion. Marital status and literacy levels reflect social and educational aspects, indicating levels of development and social stability. Occupational characteristics shed light on economic activities and employment patterns. By analyzing all these elements, population composition gives us a comprehensive picture of the demographic makeup, which is essential for planning and development purposes. This detailed understanding helps us see how different factors interconnect and influence the overall demographic landscape. So, as of 2011, a significant portion of India's population, about 68.84%, still lives in rural villages. In fact, there are over 640,000 villages across the country, highlighting how deeply rooted rural communities are in India's social fabric. When we look at the distribution, some states have a very high rural population percentage. For example, Himachal Pradesh has the highest, with nearly 90% of its people living in rural areas, followed closely by Bihar at around 89%. On the other hand, states like Goa and Mizoram have a much lower rural population, Goa with about 38% and Mizoram around 48%. This shows a more urbanized demographic in these regions. Interestingly, Delhi, being a major urban hub, has only about 2.5% of its population living in rural areas, which underscores the stark contrast between urban and rural populations in different parts of India. This rural-urban composition is crucial because it influences everything from development policies to resource allocation, and it ties into the broader theme of how India balances its rural roots with rapid urbanization. Let's look at the rural population proportions across different states. Starting with some states that have a high percentage of rural populations, Meghalaya stands out at nearly 80%, specifically 79.93%. Uttar Pradesh is close behind at 77.73%, and Arunachal Pradesh follows with 77.06%. Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand also have significant rural populations, at 76.76% and 75.95% respectively. These figures indicate that in these states, a large majority of people still live in rural areas, which has important implications for development and resource allocation. Now, moving to the moderate proportion category, we see states like Himachal Pradesh at almost 90%, with 89.97%. Bihar also falls into this category with 88.71%. Assam and Odisha have rural population proportions of 85.9% and 83.31%, respectively. These numbers tell us that even in states with a somewhat balanced urban-rural divide, a substantial portion of the population remains rural. Understanding these differences in rural population proportions is crucial because it helps us grasp the diverse development needs across India. States with higher rural populations may require more focus on rural infrastructure, agriculture, and basic services, whereas states with relatively lower rural proportions might be more urban-centric in their development strategies. Overall, recognizing the distribution of rural populations across states helps us tailor our policies effectively, ensuring inclusive growth that benefits all sections of society. Now, let's take a look at some specific examples of states and union territories with low proportions of rural populations. For instance, Delhi has a rural population proportion of just 2.5%, and Chandigarh is slightly higher at 2.75%. These figures highlight how urbanized these areas are, with very little of their populations living in rural settings. Moving on to the union territories, we see some remarkable numbers. Goa's rural population is around 37.83%. Mizoram's is an even higher 47.89%. Tamil Nadu stands at 51.6%, and Kerala has the highest among these, at 52.3%. What this tells us is that these states and UTs are predominantly urban or semi-urban, with a very small proportion of their populations living in rural areas. This pattern is important because it reflects the level of urbanization and development in these regions. Understanding these differences helps us grasp how population distribution varies across the country, which is crucial for planning infrastructure, resource allocation, and development policies. It also ties into the broader theme of urban-rural dynamics and how they influence economic growth and social change. Let's take a closer look at the urbanization levels across different states and union territories in India. As you can see, some states like Himachal Pradesh, with around 10.03%, Bihar at 11.29%, Assam at 14.1%, Odisha at 16.69%, and Meghalaya at 20.07%, have relatively low levels of urbanization. This indicates that a large portion of their populations still resides in rural areas. Moving on to the Union territories, Delhi stands out with a very high urbanization rate of 97.5%, followed closely by Chandigarh at 97.25% and Lakshadweep at 78.07%. These numbers reflect how these areas are predominantly urban, with most residents living in cities or towns. In terms of states with a high degree of urbanization, Goa has about 62.17% of its population living in urban areas, Mizoram at 52.11%, Tamil Nadu at 48.4%, and Kerala at 47.7%. These figures show a significant shift towards urban living, which is an important aspect of development and economic growth. Understanding these differences in urbanization helps us see the diverse patterns of development across the country. It also ties back to our broader theme of how urban growth impacts infrastructure, economy, and social dynamics in India. India is truly a land of linguistic diversity. According to Grierson's Linguistic Survey of India, conducted between 1903 and 1928, there were about 179 languages spoken across the country, along with as many as 544 dialects. That's a remarkable number, highlighting just how rich and varied our linguistic landscape is. Today, however, the situation has evolved. We now recognize 22 scheduled languages officially, which are given special recognition and protection. Besides these, there are many non-scheduled languages spoken by various communities throughout India. This diversity in languages is a reflection of our complex social fabric and cultural heritage. It also plays a crucial role in shaping our identity and unity in diversity, which is a core theme of India's national ethos. Understanding this linguistic composition helps us appreciate the depth of our cultural mosaic and how language acts as a vital link connecting different communities across the country. Let's take a closer look at the linguistic classification of the major Indian languages. As you can see, the largest group is the Indo-European or Aryan languages, which make up about 73% of speakers. Next, we have the Dravidian family, accounting for around 20%. Then there's the Sino-Tibetan group, which is a smaller but significant part, roughly 0.85%. Lastly, the Austric family, including Nishada, represents about 1.38%. These language families are not just isolated groups. They have various subfamilies and branches, reflecting a rich and complex linguistic landscape. This classification helps us understand how these languages are interconnected and how they have evolved over time. Recognizing these groups is essential because it connects to the broader theme of cultural diversity and historical development across India. It shows us how linguistic roots shape regional identities and influence communication across the country. Let's take a closer look at the concept of non-workers. A non-worker is essentially a person who does not work at all and depends on the working class for their livelihood. According to the 2011 census, only about 39.8% of the population are workers, including both main and marginal workers. This means that roughly 60% of the population are non-workers, which is quite significant. It highlights the large proportion of people who are not actively participating in economic activities. Now, moving on to the definitions of workers, we classify them into two groups. First, we have the main workers. These are individuals who work for at least 183 days in a year. They are the core contributors to the economy. Then, there are marginal workers, those who work for less than 183 days in a year. They might have seasonal jobs or irregular employment, but they still form an important part of the workforce. It's also important to understand the work participation rate, which is the proportion of the working population relative to the total population. This rate helps us gauge how many people are engaged in economic activities compared to the entire population. Finally, the population is divided into these three groups based on their economic status: main workers, marginal workers, and non-workers. Recognizing these distinctions gives us a clearer picture of the labor force and helps us analyze employment trends better. Now, let's take a closer look at the occupational categories of the working population in India, as per the 2011 census. Other workers make up about 41.6% of the population, which is quite significant. Within this group, agricultural laborers constitute the largest segment, accounting for approximately 54.6%. This highlights how dependent a large part of the population still is on agriculture and related activities. Then we have household laborers, who make up around 3.8%. These are workers engaged in domestic tasks, often within their own or others' homes, but they are classified separately because of the nature of their work. It's important to note that the census divides the working population into these four major categories, including cultivators and others, to better understand employment patterns and economic structure. This classification helps us see the broad picture of how people are engaged in work across the country, emphasizing the ongoing importance of agriculture while also pointing to the diverse forms of employment. Understanding these categories is crucial for grasping the overall economic and social landscape of India. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. I truly appreciate you being here and engaging with the content we've discussed. I hope you found the presentation insightful and that it provided you with valuable takeaways. Remember, the key points we've covered are all about how these concepts can be applied to make a positive impact in your work and beyond. If you have any questions or want to explore any topics further, please don't hesitate to reach out. Again, thank you for your participation and interest. I look forward to connecting with you again soon.